Hi, I'm Scott, and this is Sandy, and we're gonna solve your hardest PMP questions every single week. Let's get into this. Boom! All right, so today we're gonna talk all about how much Agile is actually on the new PMP exam. So, percentage-wise, what do you think, Sandy? We're getting a little bit of feedback from the students, like how much Agile is actually on the new exam.
I mean, we've been hearing that it is roughly 50%, right? So
Yeah.
PMI said that in the new exam would have 50% predictive and traditional, and then 50% agile slash hybrid slash adaptive. So it's turning out to be roughly 50%, just like they said.
Yeah, that's cool. And so like people out there, I think get a little worried because like the books are different links, right? Like the PIM box is thick as the phone book. The Agile Practice Guide's like a baby. So how does that make any sense? Like how does that 50%, and this is a genuine question we got to think together through, but like how does one manage their time in a sense to say, oh my goodness, you got 700 pages versus 150 or whatever it is in the Agile side? Like how should one think about that, do you think?
I mean, it's more of, I think, because there is such a big gap in there, right? And there are other reference materials that are agile related. And there are other materials that are out there, like that you can look at that talk about agile and agile teams. So there is a lot of material out there that's available. But if you're just looking at the Agile Practice Guide, it is an excellent reference. But the terminology in there is just a little bit different than other Agile organizations, because PMI has tried to stay away from repeating terminology. They're trying to make it more global, I guess, or high level something. So it's not quite as word specific as Agile, other Agile organizations. So what I would think about is, okay, if you're looking at the Agile Practice Guide and you understand, a lot of the questions are going to be about how do you apply Agile practices to your projects? If your project is traditional, can you add Agile to it, right? Can you have, maybe you have a year-long project and 3 months into it, there's something specific that can work really well with a Scrum team or Agile team. So how do you incorporate that in there? So that's the hybrid piece of it, right? And being adaptive. So I think there's going to be a lot of questions that pertain to that, and being able to answer questions about, okay, how can you answer questions that pertain to traditional project management, but also apply to Agile teams. There's a lot of examples where that happens, right? And then also, do you understand the terminology within Agile? Do you know what the teams are, the different events that they talk about, stand-up meetings, Scrum reviews, or what's the term? Iteration reviews.
Yeah, iteration
right?
planning meetings.
Iteration planning. There's all these different events that they have, understanding what those are, when do you have them, what do you do in them, who's responsible for managing them, So there's a lot of questions you can get that, even though like the Agile Practice Guide is really fairly narrow and thin compared to the PMBOK guide, you can get a lot of questions about Agile and its practices and how to apply it and who's who and what do they do and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice. And so as you get into it, it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm going to get through the 150 pages or whatever, or how you're studying. It's more of like, how do I understand what are the different roles? And then like, how would it apply? And then so it's like one of the ways I think is useful is like, hey, understand the two disciplines, understand why they exist, understand what the rules of the road are and the purpose of it. And then see like, how could these be used together in a sense? So that you start like operating with a thought experiment to say like, well, what would happen if we did that? And so, yeah, it's difficult to think through, but as we lead ourselves through, it's kind of like working more into the practical sense. So I know a lot of people in the past have said like, oh, PMI is not, or the PMP is not like practical. Like it seems with like the hybrid neighborhoods, they are walking into a practical neighborhood where you're like, oh goodness me, we're going to put a couple of these characteristics or tools into our project, and that happens every day of the week. So it seems pretty good. Yeah.
I mean,
and so go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things too is that because PMI realizes that a lot of project managers, that's what they know. They've grown up, right? using traditional project management methodologies, the PMBOK guide, that kind of thing. And that transitioning into Agile is going to be new. It's going to be different. So you'll see questions on the exam where it'll say, you're a project manager for a traditional project, and you're trying to incorporate Agile into it, but you have team members that haven't been trained in Agile. What do you do? Right. So they realize this. These are real life scenarios that could be going on right now. So they want to know that you're actually thinking about this as a project manager. And what would you do if you're all of a sudden incorporating Agile and you have a team where nobody knows what Agile is or how you want to, a sprint and that kind of stuff. So what do you do? So that's part of understanding, traditional project management, and then also looking at Agile and figuring out how you could mesh the two together and what would be some good practices with that. So that's why I think a lot of the questions will come up in reference to that too.
Yeah. And then as you're doing that, meshing together, not losing the integrity, if you will, of like what you're trying to achieve, and like what does it mean for an iteration? What does it mean, to have this kind of planning meeting, et cetera, retrospective? Like, how do we do that in purpose, not in just name? So, yeah, I think it's a difficult world to wade into, but it's possible, and obviously, and yeah, talking it through, understanding why all those things are fundamental to be able to get to the point where we can react and interpret and answer these questions. So I think it's really, really good. So I think we answered this one today. We know how much Agile's on the exam and how to kind of go at it. And if you need any help, you just reach out to Sandy and I, we can do it. So thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.